One of the things that we take for granted in a normal democratic society is that there are people out there whose job it is to look for the facts. We imagine that if we want to find the truth, we can. We forget that another kinds of politics begins precisely with the attempt to get rid of those people, to make their job impossible, and to begin from fiction. In the history of fascism and in the history of National Socialism, there's the explicit attempt to clear the whole horizon of factuality and to start somewhere else, to start with myths about the unity of the nation, myths about the unity between the leader and his people. The creators of this, the fascists, know that it is fiction. They begin politics from fiction. And so having the truth around, having producers of factuality around, is not something that one can take for granted. When people begin to attack them and their job, that's a sign that we're on the way to a completely different kind of politics. The first thing to understand about Mr. Trump is that he does inhabit a completely different mental world, and he inhabits it naturally, and he inhabits it very gracefully. He lives in a world of fiction. Mr. Trump is not a traditional person who has made a career where he's had to deal with life around him. He's never actually been that successful in grappling with any particular element of reality. Where he has been successful is as a character on television. He's never been a successful businessman, but he has played a successful businessman on television. He understands not the rules of reality, but the rules of fiction. So for him, there's no such thing as lying, because there's no such thing as the truth. We're all just in this story together. So the ways in which he's able to bring us into the world are, first of all, just by saying all the time things that aren't true. A typical politician will lie now and then, but a typical politician will also recognize the principle that there is truth, and so when caught in a lie, might apologize. In Mr. Trump's case, that never happens, because he very specifically and intentionally wants to fill up the whole space with untruth, to fill up everything with untruth so that we're confused. The second stage is, once we get there, once he changes the office of the presidency so that it's no longer about talking about the world, but instead about creating a story, then he says, distrust everyone else. There's nothing that's really true, it's just my opinion and your opinion, and since I'm the president and I have media behind me, in the end of the day it's going to be my opinion that matters. Once we get to that point where everybody doubts everything, and it's only the person who has the most media or the biggest Twitter account who counts, at that point, it's very hard to have anything like a democracy. So this is going to be a tough one to hear, and people aren't going to like it. But it's very important to understand that in fascism, the idea is that we're not individual human beings who have thoughts and reflect before we speak. The idea is that we are tribes, and that politics begins from deciding who the enemy is. So rather than being an individual, rather than thinking, what we're supposed to do is mark ourselves up into a tribe and define who the enemy is. And you define the enemy by way of a ritual. So a chant is a form of a ritual. It's no accident that those chants go directly to very elementary human feelings, so elementary that they're not just human, they're shared with other animals. The feeling that you need boundaries, the feeling of anxiety, the notion that others are different and therefore threatening. So when you go into the world of chants, you're going into the world of defining tribes. Institutions are very good things, but it doesn't make sense to trust institutions. The institution of marriage, for example, is a very good thing, but the existence of the institution doesn't make husbands and wives perfect people. The institutions that we have, our checks and balances, our three branches of government, are a very good thing, but they only work insofar as people respect them, believe in them, and try to help. Since we're in a situation where checks and balances are under obvious threat, it then becomes our job to try to help them as much as we can by electing the right people, by talking about court decisions in ways that matter to us. Checks and balances work, but they don't work the way a machine works. They work the way a marriage works. They work because people inside them try to make them work. The most important thing to see is that we are in a moment of history where what we do actually matters more than at other times. You can imagine a situation where democracy was going very well in the United States. We're not in that situation. You can also imagine a situation of full-fledged authoritarianism in the United States. We're also not there. We're in a middle situation where what we do every day matters, and the most important thing to do is to accept that responsibility and to accept that power. Each of us can do a lot more than we think we can do. In this moment, the danger is we say, I'm overwhelmed by the bad news. I'm surprised they can do this. But being overwhelmed or surprised or grieved, it can become a way of making an excuse not to do the thing that you can do. Each of us can do something. From my point of view, the important things are what you do is based on something that you know. What you do gets you in contact with other people, and what you do is something that you can do regularly. If we pick our spots, stay in touch with others, and keep doing those things, we do all end up making a substantial difference. Now, there are little tiny things that we might not even think of, like subscribing to a newspaper so that reporters can earn a salary, so that we have more factual material. There are little things that we can do almost by remote control. We can say, I'm going to spend less time on the internet. When I am on the internet, I'm going to support reporters who are actually reporting the facts. Those little things make a difference and are very easy for us. The crucial question is whether you recognize, aha, what I'm doing is tilting us this way rather than that way.